Thanks so much, Scott, and welcome everyone. The title of this fourth part in our four-part series is The Recipe for Real Business Impact. And I guess the first question is there a recipe, a secret formula to deliver significant business impact from your employee engagement survey efforts? Well, let's see if we have an answer to this question by the end of the webinar. Here's what we do know. We know, and I doubt anyone on this webinar would argue that it's a universal truth. Greater motivation, excitement, enthusiasm, and engagement leads to greater performance. Whether it's in sports, fine arts, hobbies, business, it's the same. It really does lead to it. Because of this, many people, like you, face a dilemma. And well, what's that dilemma? It is that many engagement initiatives are not making a big enough impact on the business. We hear it all the time. We've got this large initiative, we do it each year or every other year, and it isn't that easy for our business leaders to translate it into real business impact. So Scott, let's see how confident our attendees are today with their initiative. So we have the first poll question. Scott's going to set it up for you. And that poll is, how confident are you that you can prove your engagement initiative delivers real business impact? So the poll is on the right, and you can select whether bring it on, you've got the proof, relatively confident, not very confident, or not confident at all, or the last is that you haven't surveyed yet, and now we've gotten you concerned. How are we doing? Looks like people are responding very quickly. Thanks so much, everyone. And we'll close the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's look at what we got for the responses. It's going to take a minute. WebEx loves to give you a little extra time. All right, the results, though, as they came out, are that nobody said bring it on. About a third of you said you're relatively confident that executives will agree it impacts the business. That's good. And just over a third are saying you're not very confident at all, that your proof is more in participation and completion of action plans. And then about a quarter are not confident at all in that. And you know what? That's kind of what we see. And and yet, thanks for that, and yet some programs have shown positive business results. I'm not going to go through these, but hats off to Kevin Cruz. He's compiled a list of metrics of organizations that have tracked, and he's done some meta-analysis. And in a copy of the slides that you can get, you'll see even close, there's a link to that, so you can visit that if you'd like. It certainly does show that it's possible. So for those of us who want more from our engagement initiatives, let's explore how to do that. And we begin to show business impact. We believe it's time to raise the bar. And what do I mean by that? Let's talk less about participation percentages, managers doing action plans, or even the percent of completion of those action plans. Let's talk business impact. Drive in the business. We know it is when people are more engaged. Let's get there. So we start with a sad truth, and it's one of those misconceptions, but it's a sad truth that we found in our that is prevalent in engagement initiatives, and that is downplaying or trying not to measure or not trying to measure business impact of engagement is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's funny, but I've talked to so many organizations that say, gee, this first year, let's just get the survey out, let's just get our results, let's just. And what happens, though, is that it loses its energy. You haven't gained the momentum, you haven't had people see that. So today, let's not lose that focus, the business impact, because that's what we're about. So let's talk about 3 strategies you can use to increase business impact. And with that, and those 3 for us are, we're going to talk about a checkup, we're going to talk about involvement, and we're going to talk about stories. So, Scott, as we start with that first one, checkup, I'd like to ask an important question for folks that leads us into that first strategy. And that question we're going to ask in a poll. And the question I'd like to ask everyone is, which of the following elements of an engagement recipe do you feel your organization may not be investing enough time and attention? So this is a check all that apply. So is it communicating purpose and importance? Is that something you really think you could do more on? Designing the right instrument that's aligned to your business and your business strategies? How about creating upfront and implementing that accountability strategy to ensure that actions are taken? Fourth, linking those results to business metrics and other talent initiatives. The next one is delivering results that reach the heart. We know it's about emotion and passion, not just the head. Helping managers create meaningful action plans, or ensuring that action plans really create that sustainable behavior change. So as we're tracking on those, we're going to be closing the polls. And the polls are closed, and it looks like, wow, just about everyone who says that they're not providing, almost 100% of you said that creating and implementing an accountability strategy is something that's tougher to do, and it is up front. You're busy getting the survey ready, getting the, all the logistics and mechanics, and it's hard to get people to really put down the accountability. And then in the end, it's helping those managers. Also about 3/4 of you said that helping managers create meaningful action plans. We find that true also, because if you think about it, for those managers that are not driving and not creating an engaging environment, how likely are they to come up with ideas for action plans? So, boy, this is very consistent, Scott, with what we've seen and some of the organizations that we've talked to. So for that, we are going to look at our first strategy, and that strategy around that is give your engagement initiative a thorough checkup. Unbiased, unvarnished, look in the mirror. Now, there isn't time on this webinar to go into detail on each and every element of what a checkup would look like, but I'd like to share with you a framework for that checkup. That framework starts with crafting an engagement strategy. Do you have a strategy that includes a communication plan, that includes your approach to aligning and linking engagement to other talent and business initiatives? When I think about that, a talent initiative, any organization that has a high potential pool, are you tracking engagement for those hypos? Are you saying, are they doing the right things in the job they're in so they're really ready to take on that next step? So that's a very big one. How about creating that plan for action? That was where a lot of you said that accountability sits. And it is so important to get buy-in and get real support to say this is what we're going to do with those results and how it's going to drive business. Now the second part of a checkup is designing and executing that optimal survey. Are you choosing your engagement metrics that you're going to measure, selecting those right items, and make sure you've got a process that is well-oiled and works effectively? While it's important to have a core set of the same questions, do you modify your questions to stay current with your business objectives? If you haven't been, how can that survey inform your business leaders on the things they're trying to do today to move your business into tomorrow? So now, after we've designed the right instrument and had a great data collection and rolled it out project-wise, it's that next step in the process is deliver results with impact. There's that word again, impact. You know, are your results easy for busy managers to understand? Have you asked them lately? Are they something, not just to understand the percentages and how do you calculate the numbers, but do managers understand the personal side of that engagement? Do they understand how important it is to engage employees emotionally? It says to reach the heart, not just the head. Because if you're really going to get those managers on board, they have to know why the results are the way they are, and then they have to be moved to take action. So are you checking up? And we really believe that this type of a checkup could be done in a kind of a three-prong. It's like a green light, yes, ready, yellow light, you might have concerns, or red light. It's an area we need to work on. And we believe you need all these areas in order to have a successful, thorough program. The last is probably the most important, act with purpose. And that is, do you, because nothing changes unless the work environment changes, does it? We can do all the work we can, but do you see strong evidence of leaders and staff behaving in ways that are more engaging? Because if they don't, if your leaders aren't inspired, if you haven't gotten accountability to move those leaders that may not do it, if they're not urged or pushed or nudged, they're not going to get that behavior change, and you won't get results that change year over year. Now, with this model and this approach, I will tell you to stay tuned in the weeks ahead for more information on how you can conduct a checkup of this type. We're going to be publishing more information on that, so stay tuned. Next, I'd like to talk about our second strategy, and that is, it's a more direct strategy than an audit, and that is to involve non-HR, non-talent management leaders when creating your business impact measures. And what do I mean by that? Well, there are a lot of people that and I'll bet many of these people are themselves passionate about engagement, but are you involving them? Are they part of your project team? Let me give you an example. What about your CFO or other finance leaders? Is there a person from finance who can become one of your champions? They sure know how to tap into business metrics. They have them at the tip of their fingers. If you can get their buy-in and they can help craft that equation of linking engagement to results, they're going to help convince, their passion and their rigor is going to help convince the rest of the organization that you really have translated your initiative into results. That's one group, but there are other groups. Another group that I'd like to share. If you and your organization are doing lean manufacturing or Six Sigma initiatives, this is a group you may not have thought of, but there are lots of folks that lead these initiatives. They are all passionate about their work. And if you've instituted this, have them part of your team, because low engagement areas or pockets where engagement is low, help them think of it as waste, because in their world, waste is what they're trying to remove. Low engagement is a team that isn't performing as successfully, a group that has poor safety records. Those are all forms of waste that are human created, and therefore help them track metrics. They're great at tracking metrics. Help them on your side, and you will have a strong ally to your entire operations group. But there are other groups, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but whether it's operational efficiency groups, your quality group, if you have a quality person or a quality team, the safety and errors, boy, anyone who's involved in safety, quality control are great people to put onto your team, as well as anyone who's in a business analytics area. They have quick access to metrics. So those are all people that can be part of the team, and you just need to sell and position what you're doing for them. Help them envision a more engaged workforce. In other words, how much more successful or profitable, efficient, safe would we be if all employees were more engaged? Will you help us? What a great way to bring them onto your team. So with this strategy, I'd like to know how many of you have already tapped into these kinds of resources. So I'm going to ask you to make sure you have your chat panel open like Scott mentioned, and I'd like to ask you to give us who have you recruited, if you have, to your project team to help you develop metrics. Some of those non-HR, non-talent management people. And not only if you could list the role of that person in the chat, I'd like to give you, if you can, give a scale of 1 to 10. How valuable was that? How valuable was their involvement? Ideally, it would be great if you were giving me 10s or 9s or 8s, but I'd really like to know. So type in send that response back to us of the ones that you have done. So key those in. Love to see who might be those ones that you've tracked.
And just a reminder, everyone, to open up the chat panel. Go ahead and at the top of your screen, there's a little bubble with the word chat underneath it. Click that. A little bit below that, you may also see a arrow pointing to the right with the chat on it. You can also click that as well and type your response into the box down below and hit the send button.
In a prior organization of mine, we had a CFO that was very passionate about engagement, and he helped track measures and come up with those measures that would help really tell the story in numbers of the business impact of having a highly engaged workforce where there was retention. But Scott, we're not getting a lot of folks that have tapped into this resource.
No, not a ton.
So I really would encourage you to reach out to those people and try to bring them in, hook them in, draw them into what you're doing, because they can help you, because their credibility is so strong in their own circles that they're going to make more managers believers that this is a business impact and they can drive that. So I highly encourage you to reach out to them, get them on your team, get them looking at metrics.
And Mark, one important note here, and let me just scroll through the answers here. Yeah, I don't see CFO on any of these answers.
No.
Interesting how people get business impact without involving those type of leaders.
Exactly. And they're the ones that have instant credibility in the organization. If they've done a calculation of retention or turnover or errors, everyone will believe them. So with that, I'd like to move to our third strategy. And as I had kind of foreshadowed earlier, it does move in a different direction. And that is leverage the power of story. And I'm sure occasionally you hear this, but you know what? There are so many ways where powerful messages are conveyed in story. We hear from Peter Guber and his comment there that we're in the emotional transportation business. Isn't that true? I like what Jonathan says, the author of The Storytelling Animal. Humans simply aren't moved by actions of data dumps. Think of how many times we share engagement results and it's data. It is just data. They're not moved by that. So the power of story is so important. People who do work in highly engaging work environments love to tell others about it. It's like lightning in a bottle. So telling powerful, high-impact stories is not new, and it's not reserved for just certain settings. We can use it in engagement. So here's where I know that you have shared some stories, and I am going to ask again for a chat. Love to have your answers. How have you used stories and storytelling in your initiative? So if you would please enter in, how do you use that? How do you capture some of the things that have gone well, whether it's groups that have improved or taken a different approach? So love to hear your answers. Please give us a chat. You know, some people will capture, and please keep chats coming in. I'd like to share with you some that our clients have done. For instance, we have a large healthcare client that doesn't like to say best practices, doesn't like that term, and it's confusing in healthcare because there are clinical pathways and other aspects. So they call them success stories. They say, do you have a success story to share? And so they capture from across their organization aspects and elements of where groups have improved engagement, have created more engaging environments. They call them success stories, and they use those recipes, those approaches in subsequent survey waves. So they'll capture them, report them now, and then use them later as well. Great way to use stories to be able to tell that. Here's one way that most of our organizations have found incredibly valuable, and that is they use in their engagement results an internal best-in-class calculation, taking the top, normally the top 10% of groups, identifying and creating a norm for that, showing that as an internal norm of an achievable high bar, talk about raising the bar, but then they give a shout out to those groups. They actually say, hey, there are these groups that have made the internal best, they're part of the internal best in class, congratulations, kudos. And it does several things. It makes those groups feel good, feel valued, but it also has the groups that are struggling in those areas, gives them someone they can reach out to. So that internal best in class can actually be better in many ways than an external norm that people can't reach out and ask and say, gee, why is that norm where it is? This is an internal high bar that is achievable. So certainly that's something that many of our clients have found a lot of value in.
And Mark, it looks like Mary and Jim also followed that tip there.
Oh, excellent. Great. Thank you so much. Great for that. Anybody else, please chime in chat as you go. A third way that to apply storytelling is encourage leaders to find those hidden stories. Here's where I'm suggesting that those operational leaders to dig into the leaders that report to them and find those groups where they're doing something special. They saw an issue and they're actually taking initiative, and they're quiet leaders. They don't want to toot their horn. But you know what? Their stories need to be told. So find ways to unlock those stories that don't just, that the introvert leaders and teams are doing, but they still would value being heard, but it's so much better for the rest of the organization. Great ways to tell stories. And last, I'm going to say this is use industrial strength storytelling techniques. You may say, Mark, we use stories, we capture them all the time. Do you just capture what people do and you share what they've written? Do you have someone who's professionally looking at that and telling the best possible story? So what I'd like to give for you, and I'm kind of closing up our content for today with what is an industrial strength storytelling. So these are some guidelines that are fairly standard. You can seek out your favorite storytelling guru. There are formulas for this, but you know, if you can frame your stories this way, they will have more impact. Here's what I mean. You find groups that have made dramatic year-over-year improvement, ones that have really moved the needle in a certain area based on what they've done. And that's dramatic impact that's real, not contrived, it's not forced, you got to make sure it's real, but dramatic impact. I worked with a children's hospital several years ago where one of the groups dramatically increased their effectiveness at meetings. This was a healthcare organization that was struggling. Some of the meetings were not very effective. So strong that we asked, what did you do? And they gave us they were able to tell us what was happening. So the second is to get that dramatic increase year over year, and you can get that from your data and then seek it out from the groups, kind of go in search of stories. Then create stories that show the contrast of the before and after states. It's about contrast. What do I mean by that? Well, as in stories, capture the pain of the before. So you can do that through survey comments, you can do it through interviews. If there was tremendous pain and the group doesn't want to be identified, you can do it in general by saying one customer service team had this issue, here were some comments, here's what they did. But most people, if they've really improved, they're not going to mind saying, gee, it didn't feel good before. We weren't looking at that. Any leader that has some good emotional intelligence will realize that it's okay to say, hey, things weren't as good as they should have been. What was the performance before? So the more pain, the more people will relate to that. Then you also describe the gain of the after state. What's changed? What's improved? How is it better? Boy, this is a great way. You spin that story and you show everyone else in the organization they can change if they are improved. And then lastly, reveal the impact afterward. Identify the business improvement, and don't forget the emotional or personal benefit to the people in that group. It's interesting, when I think about the emotional benefit or that whole emotion, why do you think the sportscasters, right after somebody won a big game or they had the game-winning hit or scored a touchdown or whatever, they put a microphone and they say, what's their first question? How did you feel when you did that? It's that emotional connection. And every good story, and in their case, every good interview, has that impact. So the more you can use this formula, the more you will show that kind of impact. And a tip I would suggest is if you're not involving your marketing folks in this, please get them on board. They should be, most of them are very good at telling compelling stories, and what you're trying to do is something new for them. It's not a new product, a new feature, a new benefit for whatever. This is going to get them excited. So bring a marketing person on your team as well to capture, interview people, capture stories, and tell them in the most powerful light possible. So back to our initial question of, is there a recipe? I'll tell you, and you probably know, it's not easy. There's not a cookbook. But the more we focus on what we're trying to accomplish, that business impact, that making a difference in the organization and telling that story, the closer it becomes. So I encourage you to raise the bar and enlist those people, additional people on your team who can make it happen, and I guarantee you will be more successful. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions, and any questions that you have that we can surface and discuss. We'd love to do that. And while we're doing that, can we share well, let's share the HRCI credit number, 247276. For those of you that have credit for that, this is the item for that. And then while you're recording that, I also want to reinforce what Scott said earlier, that on August 12th we have in a partnership with LinkedIn, we'll be co-presenting that webinar on employees as brand ambassadors. So please stay tuned for that as well. Go to www.tnswebinars.com to be able to register for that. You will also get other things at that site. You can get a download of the information from this webinar, earlier webinars in this series, slides are available, earlier recordings. There's a lot of information available on that website. And we have one question just came in on, John, thanks for your question. It is on how do we get senior leaders more involved? And, you know, we get that question a lot because they'll endorse a budget, they'll approve the budget, and yet they often are not ready to immediately put skin in the game. And that's where in inviting them, specifically target key leaders you believe will be good spokesmen, will be passionate. Invite them personally. A personal invitation is the best way to get them on board. And ask them, what will you do? What would you go out there and say to your group? For instance, one of the greatest ways I found people to do it is ask them, will you commit to helping drive engagement and with your teams a certain number of minutes per month even? How will you commit to that? What will you personally commit to? From the results, will you come out and have the strength of the emotional intelligence strength to say, hey, my group is a little low on this area, we're going to move on that and I'm going to help. So that's a great way to do that.
Another question coming in. Will we get the slides for after the webinar? Yes, we do send the slides out after the webinar. We'll also be sending out a link to the recording. Usually those take about a little over 24 hours, so next, probably on Monday, we'll have it in your inbox. Feel free, please, to share those with your team. Share them on Twitter. They are available for all.
Excellent, excellent, thanks. I just saw, and I missed one before, I apologize for missing. Kim, you had a comment before about the value of testimonials, things that that made a difference from prior surveys. Perfect. Those testimonials are huge. Find those people that are advocates that have found the data very valuable, and even interview them. Even do a YouTube-style video of some of those people. What a great way. It's easy to do nowadays. Anybody with a smartphone can capture that, put it on your private YouTube site, get it out there. Kathy mentioned CEO kicked off the readout session with a great story of his own engagement. There's nothing better than your senior leaders telling their engagement and what's been passionate for them. So that was very helpful. Thanks so much, Kathy. And Mary, bringing all managers together and letting the stars tell their peers their success stories. What better way than have people tell their own stories? I love it. I think people, and especially if you can help cue them up and tell them what does it mean for them as a leader to have a more engaged staff. What a great way to reinforce that. So looks like we've covered some of those. So let's any other comments, Scott, as we go?
Yeah, right before we leave, just wanted to let you know that we do love data here, and we really appreciate your feedback on this webinar. At the close of the webinar, when you close your window, you'll be asked just a few simple questions. Please, please, please take the time to fill that out. That's how we determine what our next topics are, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and how to create action plans to get you guys the information that you need to help you in your day-to-day business.
Very good, Scott. Thanks so much, and look forward to having you attend future webinars, but thanks so much for your attendance here today. Have a great rest of the week.
Bye-bye, everybody.